the LAProbate expert. And this is our recently renamed LARealestateInvestors.com podcast. We get together every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern time, and everything else in between, or on either side, I guess, and talk about all things real estate. We talk with investors, wholesalers, real estate agents, vendors to learn how we all can make more money and build more wealth in real estate. Just a quick reminder that two things I want to point out. One is if you happen to be a real estate agent, on Thursday, we host our monthly Brew Real Estate event in All Seasons Brewery on La Brea, just south of Wilshire. If you're interested, I'll put it in the chat box. It's free for real estate agents. If you're a licensed agent, come and join us. And if you do come as a result of this meeting, first 25 people, free drink ticket. So your first beer is on me. Love to have you there for that. And then next week on Thursday is the monthly real estate investors club meeting that we get together and talk about all things real estate in person. We get 250 people there. That is hosted by Lloyd Siegel. And you can go to LAREIC.com. Again, I'll put that in the chat box. And the Vendors Expo is every second Thursday of the month, so a week from Thursday at 6 o'clock in Culver City. So I'd love to have you come to that as a live event. And that's also free, free parking if you get there early enough. So look forward to seeing you guys for that. So today's call, really glad you're wondering, well, who's this lady sitting next to you with great lighting and a great background? She looks so serious. She's an attorney, so we should all be a little nervous what we say. We're excited to have Kim Lisa Taylor. Kim is I'm going to read the bio here. Nationally recognized, and this is the truth because I saw her somewhere else in the country, corporate securities attorney. And she's a speaker, and she's the author of the book, How to Legally Raise Private Money. So for real estate agents, one of the kind of next level ups I've seen, and she'll show us the book with a beautiful cover. There you go. So if you know her and you do what she says, you can retire on a beautiful island like that. There you go. She's the founder of Syndication Attorneys, which is a PLLC, and investormarketingmaterials.com. And this is how you do proper marketing materials if you're raising money for syndicated ventures. And she's a responsible attorney for hundreds of security offerings for clients who are raising money from private investors. So this is going to be a little higher level than a normal call. Though on the flip side, as an investor, I'd like to know what the best investors, syndicators are supposed to be doing. So when I invest as a limited partner, I can see those things are done. So really my interest in this is a couple-fold, both to educate. I have friends on this call who raise money for different syndications, want to raise money for syndications. But at the same time, as an investor, I want to make sure I learn what they should be doing so that I can be successful in my investments. So I'm really excited to have Kim Lisa Taylor. Welcome to our call today.
Thank you so much for having me, Bill. I'm happy to be here.
And where are you coming to us today from? From Coeur d'Alene, Idaho?
So I am physically in a little town in northern Idaho called Worley, which is about 35 miles south of Coeur d'Alene.
How far is that from Moscow, Idaho?
About 2 hours north.
I know Moscow is where the UFC football team stays when they play football against the Washington State University, which is in Spokane, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's much to know about Idaho. Never been there. Sounds lovely. Great fishing. Anyhow, great. So to give us all back, but before we start, where'd you grow up and how'd you become an attorney, and then how'd you get into syndication in particular?
So I actually grew up in Michigan and went to Western Michigan University for my undergrad. Got a degree in earth science and environmental studies, became a geologist. I'm actually licensed as a professional geologist in California. Wow. Lived there for a while, practiced as an environmental consultant. Looked into my future and said, I don't want to keep doing this. I was, doing drilling at hazardous waste sites, picking up soil samples, groundwater samples, having them analyzed to see if there was contamination, and then developing remediation systems to clean up the hazardous waste that had gotten into the environment. And just looked into my future and said, I don't want to do this forever. I don't want to be standing behind a drill rig with steel-toe boots and a hard hat forever and ever. So I think I'll do something else. So I decided to go to law school, went to the University of Denver, and came out and started practicing environmental law for a little while. Also did some homeowner association law and some real estate litigations. Just started working for different attorneys to figure out what area of practice was going to be a good fit for me. Environmental was a kind of a shoe-in, but I realized that the cases go on for like 15 years. I didn't have that kind of an attention span. And it was litigation. And I also realized that I didn't have the mentality to be a litigator. I like putting people together and helping them figure out how to make things work more than I like trying to fight and fight for other people's rights. So it wasn't a good fit for me to be a litigator. So I found a mentor who was doing syndications, real estate syndications. I really liked real estate. My husband was a real estate investor, and we were buying some stuff ourselves. And went to an event, David Lindahl's event, to see how to buy multifamily properties. Joined his coaching program, came back to Boston a couple of months later, went to a private money boot camp to learn how to do that, and really kind of fell in love with syndications and decided it was a really great fit for me. Started working with Gene Trowbridge for a number of years. We had a firm together, and then I decided in 2016 so that was in 2008, 2016, I decided to move out of California, go to Florida, and got licensed there and set up my own shop. So that's where syndication attorneys came from.
You've been all over the place.
Yeah, I've been a few places.
Normally attorneys are like in one city and one state their whole career, and you've been through, I think I lost count at 3 or 4 different states along the way.
So I'm actually licensed as an attorney both in California and Florida.
Wow.
But we're able to help people in any state because everything we're doing is under federal law.
Got it. So let's talk about that. Can you kind of give us an overview? What's a typical project that's raising money that you're involved with the legal documents for?
So we cater to a lot of people that have never syndicated before. They don't even, they're just learning for the first time what the concept is, how it works. I teach around the country at different events like this or live events where I can explain the process to people of, how do you structure a deal with investors? What kind of other legal requirements are there? So whenever you're dealing with private money from retail investors, which are just people that then you have to follow securities laws. And so we make sure that our clients have the right documentation in place and they understand the rules they have to follow. They know how to document those rules so that they're, doing it correctly and raising money legally. So that's kind of our forte, is helping people that have never done it before start their business, do their first syndications for the first time, and then go on and do, either many more or start doing bigger and bigger deals. And we've had a number of clients who we've helped through that transition.
Is there a common project that you're most involved with? Is there a couple groups of a couple common projects you both?
Well, most of our clients are doing multifamily. So we have a lot of different clients that are doing multifamily. Most of them are going through some kind of a training program first. And so there's a lot of really great real estate trainers out there right now. There's Ari Mentor, that's David Lindahl's group, Jake and Gino, the Joe Fairless Best Ever conference, and Michael Blank, his conference. So there's a whole lot of people that are teaching people how to buy multifamily and how to structure your deals and what deals to buy that are syndicatable, which ones aren't, what deals to shy away from. So more of our clients are doing multifamily deals than any other. Most of them are going to start with a project that's maybe $3 to $5 million project, where they have to raise anywhere from $1 to $2 million. That's a good, comfortable raise for our first-time clients. And then as they get more seasoned, they do more deals, they start accumulating more investors, then they can start doing bigger and bigger deals. We have some clients that started out 6 years ago buying $3 to $5 million deals, and now they're buying $30 to $50 million deals. And nice. They've built up their investor database to the point where they can now raise $10 million in a couple of weeks.
Nice. And so geographically, these deals are all over the country because you're licensed everywhere. I imagine you get business all over the place?
Yeah, we have clients that are all over the country. Not really any clients from outside the country, but we do have some people that are raising money from outside the country. Mm-hmm. But yes, our clients can come from anywhere in the U.S. Because what we're doing is helping people comply with security laws, and the U.S. securities laws only apply to the investors within their jurisdiction. So they're designed to protect the investors within the United States, and so we can operate under those rules.
And these are the rules that allow how and when they can market. So for example, oftentimes syndicators cannot come on here and present to somebody unless they know they're accredited investors or have those relationships ahead of time. Those are kind of the rules you're talking about that they have to stay in compliance with.
Yeah, and so there's a couple of different rules that most people follow. And the reason that there's something called Regulation D Rule 506 that is a securities law that allows people to raise money from investors anywhere within the US as long as they follow a prescribed set of rules. And there's two options under Reg D Rule 506. There's 506B and 506C. So Rule 506C is called the Friends and Family exemption. That actually allows them to raise money from friends, family, acquaintances, people that they've already established a pre-existing relationship with,
Right.
And then they can offer them these investment opportunities. And then there's 506C that allows our clients to freely advertise, but then they're restricted to only allowing verified accredited investors to invest in their deals.
So this is where you'll get different programs, or some are available for accredited only, some will allow non-accredited, but to do that, you first have to develop a relationship with the company. So they'll invite you to a presentation or they'll invite you to a webinar and they meet you and talk to you about what you are, and then they can offer you perhaps somebody who might not meet. The definition of accredited investor, can you share what that is for us?
Absolutely. So that's going to be people that have over $1 million net worth, excluding equity in their primary residence, or they have over $200,000 a year income if they're single, or $300,000 a year income if they're either married or a quasi-married couple. So, cohabitating couples can actually count their income together. And there's some other definitions, but those are the most commonly used ones. If someone's investing through an LLC or a family trust or something like that, it can count as an accredited investor if it has over $5 million in assets, or if all of the beneficial owners are accredited investors.
And when you say a dollar amount, tax returns, 200,000 individual, 300,000 married couple, my experience is that the companies actually have you send copies of the returns like to a third party and verify that you're actually accredited, meaning it's not like a no-income doc loan where you, oh yeah, I'm making $300,000 a year. You legitimately have to document that for that time period, correct?
It depends which exemption they pick. For 506B, the investors can self-certify. So we give them what's called a subscription agreement, and we give them the definitions, and then they attest under penalty of perjury they did meet these qualifications and they indeed are accredited. If they're going to do the 506C offering where you're advertising for investors, then they actually have to prove it by providing you with a letter from their attorney, their CPA, investment advisor, someone with a license who can vouch for them and attest to the fact that they're accredited.
So I have no such ambition in my life, but I have friends and colleagues who invested in an investment and saw what the syndicator did and said, you know what, that looks like fun. I want to do that too. I want to become a syndicator and raise money, or they hear the story of somebody who's successful at it. What would the first couple of steps be for somebody who want to transition from just being an investor and or selling something to actually syndicating a whole project and bringing that to the marketplace?
The first is education. Well, there's two things. One, you got to have the right mindset, right? You can't feel like, oh, I'm going to be borrowing money from people, or I'm going to be, asking people for money for my purposes. You're actually offering them an investment opportunity that they need. So you've got to have that right mindset, because a lot of people would be delighted to invest in real estate, but they don't know how. So if you can provide an avenue for them where, hey, you can invest in real estate, still get all the benefits of real estate investing, but we're going to do all the work, all of a sudden it sounds a lot more attractive to them. And you can passively invest with us just like you can passively invest in the stock market. So if you can explain that to them, then it becomes very attractive. So I think, that's mindset is key. And the second thing is education. You've got to go out and learn what properties to buy and what not to buy, and how to conduct due diligence on those properties, because you're stepping in the shoes of that investor. You're actually taking on a fiduciary obligation to that investor to safeguard their money better than you would your own. So you're going to have to really dig deep into that property, make sure it's a good and sound investment, that it meets, it's going to yield enough return to be able to pay them a nice return, plus pay yourself something, because it's a huge amount of work. And you really need to go to one of those training programs, for maybe just one of the people that I recommended, or there's other ones out there, but I think those are probably some of the top ones.
So look, before I go on, just to give everybody an opportunity here, this is meant to be interactive. So you are welcome to put a question in the chat box. You're welcome to raise your hand. If you're able to unmute yourself, you're welcome to jump in and ask a question. Here's a chance to talk to an attorney. I don't know. She got some fancy books behind her. I'm guessing $400 an hour or more expensive than that. Here's a chance to ask some free questions to a successful. And I've seen her on other podcasts. That's why I invited her to come on today to share with you. So if you have some questions, this is your chance to do it. If you had anything at all, if you're brand new, that's why we have this call. I told before we started, my call is going to be some brand new people, but we also have some experienced people lurking in the background who are going to appreciate the answer and want to help out as well. So feel free. There's no questions that it doesn't make sense. Cheryl, thank you so much for raising your hand. Always nice to see you. I need you to unmute yourself. And what question do you have?
I was thinking of a random question. A friend of mine has a tenant in their house that they, inherited from their parent, and the tenant is a realtor. Can't get the tenant out, and the tenant didn't want to file all the paperwork to get the assistance that we got, because both the landlord, the owner of the house, and the tenant have to apply for that. So now that everything is sort of getting back to normal, how can the owner get the person out? Because she does want to sell the property, but she doesn't want to sell it with that kind of a person in there. Does she? And I think she has attorneys, but I was just wanting to know for my own edification, how do you, deal with that? I know there's a process.
Unfortunately, that's not the area that I practice in. So there's really two. So I do real estate and corporate securities. So we set up the companies and teach people how to structure their companies so they can legally raise money from private investors. But we don't handle real estate transactional or litigation work. So that's not something we would be able to help. What they would need to find is a real estate litigator, or someone who deals with eviction specifically that would be able to help them. And they want to find somebody who's licensed in the state where that property is located.
Okay, I just was curious.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for the question. It's a good question. People don't understand the difference between the, real estate transactional attorneys and corporate securities attorneys. So it's a very legitimate question.
Well, it goes beyond that, Kelly, because my specialty is probate as a real estate agent. And there are people who will hire an attorney because he or she is an attorney, which is great, but they may know nothing about probate. And so I found in my career, in fact, my wife's best friend is a family law attorney, but she specializes in litigation specifically. And she does some celebrities here in town. I find the successful attorneys, the ones who have a very narrow focus niche. They're subject matter experts in that niche, and they don't really do anything else other than give you the name and phone number of somebody maybe outside of that. So
that's right.
I'm glad you had that answer, but I'm not surprised. I just wanted to, for everybody's benefit, you always want to work with an attorney who's a specialist. And Cheryl, we can talk offline or text me. I have different attorneys who I work with for evictions, and there's different types of eviction attorneys, come to find out. There's litigators, there's filers. So different counties, you want the county expert. You don't want somebody in Orange County if they're like county attorney. So definitely reach out to me, Cheryl, if I can help you with that.
Okay,
great.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So we got a question from Kevin, who's a title rep actually, Commonwealth Land Title. Thanks for joining us, Kevin. Is there standard cookie cutter package costs for a multifamily syndication deal? What are the usual fees?
So there is no cookie cutter because everything is individual to you and the deal that you're doing. There are, we do all of our clients' work on lump sum basis. So, typical fees for legal work with our firm can range anywhere from $2,500 to $25,000. And it just depends what you're doing. Usually for a syndicated deal where you're going to be raising $1 or $2 million, you're going to be right in the middle of that. There's our fees, and then there's also some out-of-pocket expenses that you're going to generate for forming new companies. That has to be paid to the Secretary of State. You have to hire a registered agent. If you have a company that's in a state where you don't live and you don't have a physical address there, then you have to hire a company that's going to do that for you. And then also we have to file notices with the state securities agencies, because there's two different types of agencies that govern securities transactions, where you have the raising money from these private investors. One is the Securities and Exchange Commission. So that's on the federal level. And if we're using this federal exemption, then we're actually going to file something with them and tell them that we're claiming this federal exemption for this offering. And these are the specific rules. We're going to follow 506B, or we're going to follow 506C. And this is how much we're planning to raise. And here's what it's for. And then there's state level securities agencies. So every state has its own securities agency that will be protecting its residents. So every time you bring in an investor from a new state, then we have to file a notice in that state that you're bringing in investors from that state, and they want to see the copy of the form we filed with the SEC, plus they want a fee. And those filings have to happen within a very specific time frame. So you've really only got 15 days from that, when that investor commits to your deal, for you to be able to do those filings. And so that's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand. They grab somebody else's legal documents and they try to cobble them together for their own thing, and then they don't understand there's also filings and filing deadlines, and maybe they're creating inconsistencies in the documents. So we don't recommend this as a do-it-yourself area of the law. It's really highly specialized, but it is a process.
Yeah, thank God it's a process, creates a business. Ammon puts, for a new syndicate, do they own all the equity in a newly formed LLC? Is that LLC holding cash that can borrow from lending institutions with a line of credit? That's interesting.
Well, it depends on the purpose of your syndicate. The purpose of you're going to establish the purpose of your syndicate. And you're going to, provide some kind of we call it an investment summary. We usually ask our clients to provide that, but we can help them. We have this investor marketing materials division that can help them create it if they need assistance with it. But for the most part, our clients will get something under contract, and then they'll do some minimum amount of due diligence, review the financials, take a trip to the site, make sure you have a signed purchase and sale agreement. Once you've done those three things, then we say, okay, it's time to pay us our lump sum fees and to hire us while you conduct the rest of your due diligence. And then we're going to be, drafting those documents at the same time that you're conducting the due diligence and getting ready to making your final decision whether to go forward with the deal. But in our experience, once you've done those three things, you've got the property under contract, you've been to the site, you reviewed the financials, you're 85% likely to close. We actually did statistics on that. So, if you don't close, it's probably because you didn't know enough investors and you weren't able to get the money, you weren't able to qualify for the loan, or something about the marketplace changed in the meantime and you weren't able to close because all of a sudden interest rates went up and the deal didn't make sense anymore. So that's kind of how we work with someone. Sure.
With the recent jump up in interest rates in the residential market, at least, not as much in commercial, but still it's gone up. Have you seen deals falling apart? Have you seen deals canceling?
I've seen a few. We have seen a few that where the lender pulled funding or came to the table and said, we're going to give you this much less. And so you've got to raise more money, but they're telling you that 2 days before closing. So if you don't have an extension or can't get one with the seller, then you could lose the deal. We have seen some resistance and hesitancy in the lending space. So maybe just helping your listeners understand that when we structure a deal like this, unless you're just buying single family stuff, if you're going to be doing a single family fix and flip fund, then you could be doing all cash transactions. You could be buying with all cash, and then you could be just turn that cash over 2 or 3 times a year, and that's going to generate enough of a return to give you a good return, give your investors a good return. But in most deals where you're buying commercial real estate, you're going to need to leverage that property with a bank loan, because the bank, even though they might want 6 or 7% right now, it's still less than what your investors want, because your investors want an average annual return in the mid to high teens. That's what they're looking for. And that takes into account both what you're able to pay them from cash flow, as well as what additional equity is realized on the sale after you've added value to the property by making improvements, and you've upped the rents, and now the property is worth more. So you sell it and you get a chunk of cash back, you pay off the lender, there's equity left after that, and then you're able to share that with your investors. So you take that amount, you add it to what you've already paid them from cash flow, and divide it out over the years so that you've had that property. That gives you your annualized return. So you've got to be able to project that out over a 5 to 7 year scenario, which is a typical hold time, to figure out what your average annual return is going to be. And then you're going to propose that to your investors. Hey, our projections show this. They are based on these assumptions that we're going to be able to increase the rent by this much over that period of time. And as long as those assumptions hold true, then you're probably going to meet those targets. Very likely that the assumptions won't be true, but you're going to make your best estimate and guess at the time that you're raising the money. And then we're going to put words into the document that talk about the fact that projections may change and that market conditions could change that could affect those projections. So you're going to be held responsible for it if you don't hit those exact numbers, because the real guarantee is that you won't hit those exact numbers, but you'll hit something else and it should be kind of close.
And just to summarize one point you made, which is, if you can make 15% return on investment, how much money would you borrow even at 6% or 7%? The answer is all you can. Because
Right.
if every dollar I borrow, I'm only paying 7%, we're not at 7% yet, but I can get 15%, that's why these deals are continuing. They have to get restructured, and maybe they need more equity as a percentage of the deal than initially, because the banks are nervous and banks are scared, and that's how banks are. But eventually, if you can prove that you'll make a 15% return, the banks will loosen up as well if you're able to prove that.
Right. And
So-
you're only having to make that kind of a return on maybe 25 or 35% of the purchase cost, because the rest is, you're getting a 65 or 75% loan that's wanting that lower interest rate,
Right.
which
Right.
bumps up the amount of cash that's left that you're able to share with your investors. And that's
Right.
what gets them into that mid to high teens range. And without that, you're going to be hard pressed to find a deal that would do that. Maybe a development deal can do that because they can generate some higher yields, but there's also some higher risks associated with development deals. But
Higher
your
risks.
average value add, the average value add property, where you're buying something existing, you're going to improve it by 20%, you're going to raise your rents of 20% over a 5-year period of time or something like that. That's the typical deal that our clients go after.
So Selena asked a great question, which jumped off the page to me right away. Is syndication similar to the 1980s era of limited partnerships? And this is part where private investors were solicited, and if so, how does this differ? Because wasn't limited partnership model shut down? So I don't know how much you know about this, Kim, but there was a time where there were certain types of limited partnerships, particularly oil partnerships, where you got multiples of your investment as reduction in taxes. So somebody might have invested $50,000 and they got a $200,000 deduction on their tax returns. Well, at some point, investors started just doing partnerships just for the tax benefit, let alone making any money.
Mhm.
And so those got highly regulated and caused all kinds of disruption in the marketplace. Definitely that created a stigma with the term limited partnership. But these syndications you're talking about are partnerships, and either you're a general partner or you're a limited partner, right? That's all you were talking about. It's the formation process. It's not the type of business.
Well, so typically we're using LLCs, all right, limited liability companies versus limited partnerships, but it is the exact same structure, because in a limited partnership, you have a general partner that it has unlimited liability for all acts of the partnership, and makes all, it's the head of the organization where all the decisions are made day to day about how the property is going to be operated. They oversee property managers. So you have a separate property, you have your commercial property has a property manager. It's overseen by the general partner or the management of your syndicate. And they're considered the asset manager. So they're managing the property managers on behalf of their investors. And then you have limited partners if we use a limited partnership structure, or you have members if we're using an LLC structure. And then those members can either be part of the management team or they can be cash paying investors. So we usually are going to carve up that company where a portion of it's going to go to the cash paying investors and a portion of it is going to be retained by management. So that's your typical structure. Most people these days are investing for cash flow. The tax benefits are a side benefit, but they're not the primary reason people are doing it anymore. And I think because it became so regulated that you weren't able to write off everything. As it is now, the current rules say that you can only write off up to the amount of your investment. So you can't write off more, you can't invest $5 and write off 100,000, right? You've got to, you can only do that. And that has to be either from your cash investment, or if you're part of management, you can actually get some of it attributed to you for your signing on the loan, right? Because you're taking on some risk there, and that can be considered an investment. So you've just got to be cautious about that. But yes, we don't have people that are investing purely for the tax benefits anymore. Everybody wants the cash flow and also the limited tax benefits that they can get.
It's also true that, again, I was around in the 1980s doing mortgages, that there are marginal tax rates of like 70 and 80%. Now, we had more deductions, such as rural depletion and things like that people would not pay 80% in taxes at the end of the day. But that was the marginal tax rate. And so you'd make these tax investments in those days strictly just to reduce your taxable income and hide from it. And again, with the marginal rates now, 38% plus California tax plus whatever, still below 50. It's a little different game than before. Okay, hey, we have a real attorney here. I know she is because it says attorney on her website. Just kidding. But no, obviously an incredibly sharp person, great asset. Here's your chance to ask questions about investing money, and whether you want to be an investor, limited partner, like I am in investments, or you're looking to grow up and be a syndicator. Here's a chance to talk to an expert in that field. Feel free to raise your hand, put in the chat box, or if you're watching on the live stream, feel free to put it there and I'll jump in as well. So I made a couple of limited partnership investments a couple years ago. I was shocked. I made it in December. And now I don't know if you get the tax side of it at all, but I'm sure you have some experience with it, where I made an investment of like $50,000 in December. And I got a K1 statement showing that I had a loss of $40,000. And that lowered my tax liability that year by $40,000. I ended up saving about $9,000 on my tax bill right away. So that's one of the benefits, obviously, of potentially for investors. Do you get into what promoters are allowed to talk about with tax savings, or how obviously you're not a tax preparer, your customers aren't typically tax preparers. How do you talk about the advantages of taxes without crossing that line and causing problems?
So we have the documents that we draft reviewed periodically by tax attorneys or CPAs to make sure that they're compliant with any changes in the tax law. And then the provisions that we have in our operating agreements, our clients will take them and give them to their tax preparers, and then they'll be able to follow the rules that we've set forth on how those allocations are going to be made. And the default is that your whatever percentage interest you own in that company are going to match the allocation of any losses or gains that the company generates. And so it's always going to be usually always going to be according to your percentage interest. There are limited times that you can do it disproportionately, but that's always with advice of your tax counsel. But yes, the other thing about the tax benefits is that they're limited. You can only take the passive losses up to the amount of gain you had in other passive investments. So you can't use it to offset your W-2 income from your job. So if you have other gains, so if you've been invested in multiple syndicates and one of them has gain and another has loss, then you're only able to take that loss up to the amount of the gain that you received in the other. You can carry it forward if you don't have enough gain to be able to use it all. Then you are able to carry it forward. But that, we don't really get into giving tax advice. We also recommend that our clients do not give tax advice, that all of your investors have to seek their own tax advice, legal advice, or any other advice they think is necessary for their financial portfolio.
I think I realized why when I talk to people about investing deals, they always send me the whole document package. The answer is the document package has been approved, document package, all the claims and numbers and all that. Anything else, one could say they were misled. Number one, so that there's a certain legal action by relying on the documents. And the second is they probably paid a fortune to you, I mean, relatively speaking, to get the documents put together. They're proud of them. They want to give them out to people to use them. If they don't use them, I guess they're going to feel like they get their money's worth, but they probably did, but they just don't feel like it. Is it something along those lines, maybe?
Well, the way that we suggest this goes back to the earlier conversation we were having about investment summary. So with all the legal packages that we put together, which is anywhere, if we're doing a syndicate or a blind pool fund, then there's going to be 120 to 180 pages of legal documents that we're generating for that deal. And that's a lot of stuff for our clients to read, especially if they've never done it before, but we try to make it as easy as possible. But the investment summary is what we ask our clients to put together, like I said, or we could help them if they need help with it. But the whole point of that document is so that you have something that's written in plain English, that has nice pictures, nice graphic layout. It shows exactly what they're investing. And the investors are going to make their decision based on that document. They're going to read it. So for instance, if someone's buying a multifamily property, they're going to put together an offering memorandum that looks very much like what a broker would give you for a property that's for sale. But you're going to substitute their numbers, which are probably, kind of inflated and made up because they really want to sell the property and they're telling you all the great things you can do with it. And you're going to give it a reality check, and you might substitute that with your own, what's called pro forma. So you're going to have 3 tables that you would generate. One is called the sources and uses of funds. Where am I getting the money from? How much of it is coming from the bank? Is there a seller credit? And how much do I have to raise from investors? And then you're going to have a uses of funds where this is all the things that it's going to cost me to get into this property. And you want to make sure that one of those line items is an acquisition fee for yourself. That's usually 1 to 3% of the purchase price, because this is your immediate reward for all the hard work you did to get the deal to the table, and for all the other deals that never happened because you had to look at a bunch of duds. And so then your uses of funds is going to have closing costs. If the lender requires you to put any money into impound for taxes or insurance, then they're going to be line items on that uses of funds, and all of your pre-closing expenses. Because when you're syndicating, you have to put money out of pocket for all the things that you do pre-closing, and you're not allowed to use the investors' funds until you actually close on the property. Because if something goes wrong and you can't close on the property, you have to give the investors money back without deduction. So you're putting your money at risk up front. And if to do a multifamily deal, a $5 million multifamily deal, you might need $50,000 or $100,000 to get that deal to a closing table, to be able to pay lender fees and to pay your, pay appraisal fees and environmental phase 1 site assessments. All those things that the lender is going to require in addition to your property inspection reports and any other experts that you might want to hire to help you conduct due diligence on that property. So you've got all that money out, it's at risk. And then if you close on the property and you raise enough money from investors, you can pay yourself back or reimburse yourself for those costs, because they actually are costs of the syndicate, or you can use that as your cash investment in the syndicate. Hey, I put in $50,000 worth of pre-closing expenses. Instead of getting cash back, I'm going to leave it in the deal, and I'm going to use it to buy interest right alongside my investors. So this investment summary is going to lay all that out. It's going to lay out the sources and uses of funds. It's going to have a pro forma. So you're going to say year by year, okay, this is where the property is right now. And by next year, I'm going to have made this many improvements. I'm going to raise this much rent. By the end of year 2, you should have raised all the rent you needed to raise. And you've got everything working efficiently. You're optimizing the property. And then maybe in year 2 or 3, you're going to refinance, because now the property is actually worth more than when you bought it. And so you could refinance, maybe get some better terms on a loan, also maybe give your investors part of their money back. And then you would continue to own and operate the property for another 3 to 5 years. And then at some optimal time in the future, when prices are high, like now, you might say, well, this is a good time to sell, or you could get some crazy unsolicited offers. I've had that happen to a lot of clients. So, 3 years into a deal and somebody offers them 3 times more than what they paid for it. So, lots of different scenarios can happen, but ultimately you need to be able to hold that property indefinitely, because what if we're in a down cycle at the end of that 5 years.
Right.
And it's a terrible time to sell. So then you need to make sure that your investors understand that we're going to hold it until the market conditions are optimal. And that's when we're going to make the decision when to sell. And sometimes even maybe it's not a sale. Maybe you decide you're going to do a 1031 exchange. So you could go to your investors and say, hey, we have an opportunity to buy this other property. Instead of everybody getting cash out and then paying the tax on that gain, we're going to turn around and put it into another property. How does everybody feel about that?
Well, wow, that amazing insight, explanations into what's complicated, but I think you really kind of laid out fairly simply the process. Yeah, wow. I mean, and I think you answered the question also that's there about where's the money go, that the money really is at the risk of the syndicator until they close the deal. And then either they get paid back at that time or they can put the money into the deal. So
well, I think the other part of that question that Ammon asked is if I'm forming a syndicate, where does the money go before we pay the bank? And so what you have two options for that. You can open what's called a securities escrow account. There's a very limited number of banks that will do this for you, but they'll open an account where your funds are going to be held and they're not going to release them to you until some milestone is met. So that's going to be something that we write into the offering document saying, hey, if we need $2 million to close this property, but we need $2 million to close it and do all the improvements we want to do. But if we can raise 1.5 million before we close, then we'll go ahead and close on it. If we raise less than that, we're just not going to do the deal. And so we'll put in a minimum dollar amount that has to be raised before the deal is viable, so that you're not getting into it and just ending up with the same property the seller had that's underperforming, because you've got to be able to make those improvements to generate the extra income. But so we'll have you either put the money into this escrow account where they're going to look at that and say, have you met your minimum? If you met your minimum, we'll release the funds to you, you can close on the property. The other way to do it is to just open a company checking and savings account and keep the money in your savings account until you're ready to close property. And then the title company is going to tell you, or the escrow is going to say, this is exactly how much you need to close. You're going to raise all this money in your own company's bank account. You're going to have the discipline not to touch it or anything until you close on the property. And then you're going to wire exactly what they need to the property escrow account. So the securities escrow is not the property escrow account, because you're never going to want to put your investors' money into the hands of a third party who can control whether you get it back. So you always want to keep it in your company's bank account that only you control until you need it for closing. If you've raised enough money, you'll have extra money in your company's bank account for your capital improvements and to be able to pay yourself back for your pre-closing expenses and your acquisition fee.
So obviously, you deal with a number of investment firms, some good, some bad. You see a bunch of deals, some good, some bad. I imagine in the course of marketing, you meet other deals that maybe aren't your clients. You wish they were your clients. Are you able to share with us? What do you do with your investments? What type of properties? What are you looking at? And
I invest with, I have invested with some of my clients. My husband and I actually did our own syndicate. We purchased a 27-unit apartment complex in Columbus, Ohio that we owned for 9 years with some friends. And we eventually sold it, I think in 2019. And, it was a challenging project. We bought it at the wrong time in the market. So I think we closed on it in 2010. And so it took a long time to come back up in value to where we could actually sell it for enough to make a decent return for ourselves. We ended up, I think everybody made all the money back that we had put into it over the years, plus a 12% return. So it was modestly successful, but it wasn't a home run by any means. And it was one of the things that was challenging about it for us is that it's hard to have small properties far from home. And at the time that we purchased that property, we were planning to buy 2 more properties in Columbus so that we could have had our own property management company exclusively managing all 3 properties. And because of the time in the market that we closed on the first one, we weren't able to close on the second 2. So my advice to my clients is, buy everything small that you can within 2 hours of where you live. But you really need about 80 units if you're going to have it far from home, so that you can have a full-time maintenance person, a full-time property manager that you control. versus hiring a big property management company that's local that doesn't give your property enough attention. And that was the challenge that we had, was trying to, it was like a third time job for somebody to be a maintenance person and to lease our property, and local properties wouldn't give us that much time.
It never works out, that 1/3 management thing. It sounds great on paper, but it never works out. Great insight. Thank you so much. Kevin asked, what do you normally see as sponsor fees and returns, and what would trigger a red flag to you as an investor?
So that's a really good question, Kevin. So the sponsor fees, there's actually a ton of articles on our website. So if you go to syndicationattorneys.com and into our library and then select articles, there's over 50 different articles in there. They're all 1 or 2 pages, or you can read it in my book. If you get my book, you can get that free at our website. If you go to syndicationattorneys.com and go to the get the free book tab, then you can get a free digital copy of the book, or you can buy it on Amazon. So there's chapters in there about that, but I'll still tell you what it says. I just want to direct you to some additional resources so you guys can read more about it later on. But I think there's an article in there called 12 Ways to Raise Money or to Earn Money as a Syndicator. So that's the one you want to look for. But typically, acquisition fee, 1 to 3% of the purchase price. It actually could go 1 to 5% of the purchase price. The smaller the property, the larger the fee. The bigger the property, the lower the acquisition fee. So if you're buying $10 million deals, then you're going to be doing 1% acquisition fees. If you're buying $5 million deals, you're probably doing 3% acquisition fees. If you're buying 500 $1,000 or $1 million deals, then you could be doing up to 5% acquisition fee. Also asset management fees. So this is what you get for acting as the long-term asset manager. So your job is to manage the investment company, which has your investors in it. And that means overseeing property management, all things that are happening at the property, in addition to reporting to your investors and making sure they get their distributions and all of that. So those are usually 1 to 2% of gross collected income. Other fees could be a loan guarantor fee. Sometimes you might have to pay somebody else with a nice balance sheet to be able to come in and help you guarantee a loan, because even though there are loans that are called non-recourse loans, where they look to the property for the payback instead of your personal financial statement, they're never going to lend to you unless you produce people with financial statements that are equal or greater than the loan amount. And so maybe you and 2 other people, or depending on the size of the deal, you might have to bring somebody in with a really great balance sheet to help you augment that. So loan guarantor fees, they could be a flat fee. They could be 1 to 2% of the loan amount. You can do the same for a refinance fee, 1 to 2% of the loan amount. Also, you could do a disposition fee just to make sure that you get paid before you start splitting money with investors. I've had some clients that didn't do disposition fees before, and they said, well, we did all this work packaging the property and trying to get it sold. You've got to provide all this documentation to the buyer and to their lender and all this stuff. And, then at the end, there wasn't sufficient money left to really pay the syndicators for all the work that they've done. And the investors ended up with all the money. So you've just got to, you can read that article about different ways you can earn money. Also, if you're a real estate broker, you can still get brokerage fees. They just have to be disclosed. Anything, if you are your own general contractor, you can get paid as a general contractor as long as the rates you're charging are the same or commensurate with paying a third party for those same services in the area of that property. So you are able to do that, but you are required to disclose all the different ways you could make money off the deal. But the fees aren't where you make your money. The fees are just to keep you going. It's to put gas in your car, to make sure you got food on the table, you're not starving, right? The fees are kind of your limp along money. Where you really make your money is by making that property perform, and then you get a share of the profits. Very typically on a commercial deal, there's a 70-30 split between you're selling 70% of the company to your investors, but they're putting up 100% of the money. And so your investors could include you if you're contributing cash to your own deal. So all investors contribute cash, they get 70% of the deal, and then you carve out 30% for the management team This is for your sweat equity. For this is all your work in putting the deal together and making it perform, and finding the deal in the first place and putting the group of investors together. So then usually you're going to have some kind of what we call it a waterfall whenever there's cash flow generated either from just operating the property and collecting rents and there's excess income, or later on if you do a capital transaction such as a refinance or a sale and so cash comes back to you, then you're going to use this waterfall to decide how to distribute that cash. And so first you're going to usually give something to your investors, and then there could be something for you, and then there's going to be a split. And so this is where we get into these splits. And sometimes there's a cap on investors that say, okay, but once you get to an IRR of this and you've gotten all your money back, maybe it's 15%, maybe it's 17, maybe the split changes. No longer is it 70-30 split. Maybe the investors now we're going to be doing a 50-50 split or something like that.
How often do you see investors putting money into the deals, and how important would that be to you as an investor?
As far as the syndicators putting money into their own deals, some lenders will require it. They usually would all love to see 10% from the management team, 10% of the deal. So if you have that, that's great. If you don't have it, then you can bring someone in your management team that's going to put up that amount. And, they don't care whether it's the management entity or the individuals who are members of the manager, they're putting up the money. They just want to see that collectively the management team has put up that 10%. Some people that don't have that, they might go out and do what's called a GP fund, where you actually do a mini syndicate in order to raise the money to be able to go out and go after these deals and to put up all these pre-closing expenses and maybe leave that 10% in the deal for each one, so that these investors in your GP fund are now earning some additional benefits out of your syndicates.
Okay. Well, I think we've caught up all the questions I see both online and here. And now we're coming up on the end of our time. And I know it's a little later for you. And Kimberly Stair, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate you being on today. I felt like I learned so much. I had a quick class, about a 4-hour class in 50 minutes on syndications. And definitely both, I have no ambition to be a syndicator, but I do want to be a smarter investor. And I want to make sure that I'm working with syndicators who are, on the top of their game. And so I really appreciate you bringing that to us. I put in the chat box, if you're interested in her free book, How to Raise Money, how to legally raise private money, as if that's important to people. I'm sorry, I should say it like that.
I mean, the implication there's a whole lot of people that are doing it illegally, and that is the case.
Well, or that you have a sequel, How to Raise It Illegally. Maybe there's another book, and that's more interesting, I think.
That guy's in jail, that author. In fact, I think he actually passed away a few years ago. His name was Bernie Madoff.
Oh, exactly. So anyhow, and then I see you have a forward with Dave Lindahl, which is, wow, that's pretty impressive. You have one of the top, I guess, real estate investor trainers in the country on your book. So congratulations on that. Free copy, digital copy if you register online. And then if you want to reach out to her, you have her website, and there's all kinds of ways to reach her and different programs where she'll be at and those kinds of things. So any last messages if someone to reach you, any particular place you want them to get out to? Or?
Well, here's my thought. So somebody mentioned early on, hey, I'm new to this. I don't know, it seems like this is really advanced. So, you're eventually going to run out of your own money if you want to be an investor. So you're at some point going to have to figure out how to do something different to augment what cash you have to still make a living for yourself in the real estate investment space. So as you progress, this is just another tool in your toolbox to know, right. Maybe you're going to start out doing single family stuff with private lenders. That's okay. Right. Nothing wrong with that. But eventually that's going to become limiting for you. It's not that scalable. And so if you want to scale up and you wanted to start doing bigger properties or more properties, then you're going to have to learn these skills that we're talking about. So I would encourage everyone to read my book. The last chapter is dedicated to people who are investing passively in other people's syndicates. And the reason I think that the book is important for them is because if you read the book and you understand what they're supposed to be doing, you're going to be able to spot the people who aren't doing it. And then you want to shy away from people who aren't doing it legally because they're putting your money at risk. Right? Because they're at risk of getting, hauled in front of regulators or sued by an investor, and then your money's tied up in that and you don't get it back. So you want to make sure that you're dealing with, reputable firms that are following the rules. And once you know the rules, you're going to be able to determine that. I would also encourage everybody to subscribe to our podcast, which is called Raise Private Money Legally. And we have over 50 episodes. Actually, we just hit 60 episodes right now. So there's over 60 episodes of it. It's on 20 different podcast platforms. Go to that, listen to that. There's all different level of, teaching there. Some things I've taught. I interview people who are providing services to syndicators. So as you grow your syndication business, you're going to know who to go to if you need some additional services. So I would just highly recommend that you check that out. That's going to get you involved in the lingo, the language we're talking about, but it's also going to help you understand how to talk better to your proposed investors.
Fabulous. All kinds of stuff there at syndicationattorneys.com. Again, syndicationattorneys.com. Kimberly Satilla, thank you so much for being on our call today. Thank you for helping everybody from the brand new person. I appreciate your encouragement, where your heart comes from, and for the high level of education. My head's spinning. I got your ebook on the way myself. I'll look at that, but not now. I'm a little overwhelmed with what we learned already today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.